So we've seen that the crucial verse which permits divorce, it's from the Parsha of Kitei Say, and it requires that a husband gives a wife a document and then she leaves vehaita leish acher, and she can be married to another person. So the essential feature of the divorce process after she receives the divorce document is that she is free to marry another person. And as we get into the ninth chapter of Gittin, we're going to explore around this very, very point. So, the Mishnah explains, Hamagareshet ishto ve'amarla. Someone divorces his wife and he says to her, Muteret l'chol adam eila. You are free to marry any man, but any man except for. You're free to marry any man except for Leish Poloni, except for so and so. He names a person whom she can't marry. And we might kind of imagine all kinds of reasons for this. And perhaps, today we might, well, we don't know. We're dealing, of course, with a relationship which has broken down. So it's possible to imagine all kinds of tensions and problems. And we can also imagine that this is what maybe today people would call coercive control. Sometimes if the man is taking control of the woman, maybe he wants to control her even after the divorce. So we can imagine someone saying, I'll divorce you on condition that you get married to anybody, but not this person over here. Rabbi Eliezer matir. Rabbi Eliezer actually permits, and I don't understand why he permits, for chachamim osrin, and the rabbis forbid, because clearly the sense of the verse is that she can be married to another man. He doesn't have the right to do that. So what does he do? What does he do? Keitzad yaseh. So how does he do? Yitlenu mimena. So he takes back the divorce document. He's given it to her with this condition. He takes it back, and then he gives it back to her again. Yitlena mimena v'yachzor v'yitnenu la. He should take it back from her, and then he should give it to her again. So he gives her the document the second time round. He repeats the divorce process. And this time he says, V'yomar la harei at muteret l'chol adam. At that point he says, you're free to marry any man. Kaufman actually says adan. I don't know why that is, but I'm translating it in a line with the written text as Adam rather than Adan. Maybe it means any. I don't know why it says Adam. Im ketavo b'tucho. If he actually wrote it in the get, if rather than saying that restrictive condition, he actually wrote it in the get, afal pi shechazar umchako pasul. Even if he went and then corrected the get, even if he erased it, the get is invalid. Once he writes that condition in the get is completely invalid. Verbally, he can retract. If once it's written, it cannot be erased. And even if it is erased, the get is invalid. Now, are there situations where he can restrict? So the Mishnah is now just going to explore some of those. So maybe he says to her, Hareyat muteret l'chol adam. Here we've got the word Adam written with a mem again. You're permitted to any man. Eile le'aba ulavich. Except my father and your father. You can marry any man except my father and your father. Well, hang on. We know that she can't marry her father or his father. It's a biblical prohibition that the marriage, it's not a marriage, it's a biblical prohibition. So he's saying you can marry any person, and he's named a couple of exceptions, but these exceptions are people she's already forbidden to marry. And then the list goes on. You can't marry my brother or your brother. You can't marry my brothers or your brothers. You can't marry a slave or a Gentile. Ulechol mi she'ein la'alav kiddushin. And she lists anybody who she can't accept kiddushin from, and the Mishnah rules kasher. The get is still kasher. So mentioning a list of people who to whom she can't get married anyway doesn't seem to invalidate the get. But here we're going to see an interesting but. Let's say he says to her, "Harayat muteret lechol adam eila." He says you're permitted to anyone except. And now he gives a list of relationships which are forbidden, which which are which are against the law, and yet these marriages, if they take place, are valid marriages. So, well, the classic list now. Almanah lechohen gadol, a widow to a high priest. A high priest is forbidden from marrying a widow, but if he does marry her, the marriage is valid. Grusha v'chalutza lechohen ediot, a someone who's divorced. Well, obviously she's divorced or has received chalitza, lechohen gadol, lechohen ediot, to an ordinary priest. It's another marriage. A divorced woman or a chalutza is not allowed to marry an ordinary priest, but if she does, the marriage stands. So we're coming through here with a list of lesser prohibitions. A marriage to a father or a brother is just not a marriage. But these are marriages where, okay, if it takes place, then we have to discuss what happens next, but it is a marriage. And this is a famous list. The reason I think we're including Grusha, for example, well, we know, which means divorced woman. Well, we know she's divorced, but we're just going through a standard list of forbidden marriages, and we've seen this many times before in the Mishnah of Nashim. So we're going to have Grusha v'chalutza lechohen ediot, someone who's divorced or has carried out chalitza to a regular kohen, mamzeret to netina Israel, someone who's a woman who's a mamzeret or a netina. A netina is a Gibeonite. These are people who are, well, they converted in the time of King David, but they're kind of, the rabbis reject the conversion in any case. So they're not considered Jews. A mamzeret, or someone who's not considered Jewish, to a Jewish man, uvat Yisrael a mamzer natin, or a Jewish girl to a mamzer or a natin. Ulechol mi sheyesh lo alav kiddushin afilu ba'avera. Anybody who's capable of betrothing her, even in transgression. So he makes this condition. He makes this condition. I'm giving you the get, but you can't marry these people. You can't marry these people. And theoretically, she could get married to them. It's a transgression, but theoretically, she could get married to them. And the rabbis will not accept that kind of restriction on the get. And the get is pasul. The get doesn't work. For the get to work, it has to be handed over effectively with no restrictions. No restrictions as to anybody she can marry, except for marriages that clearly don't work. So in summary, and we've seen this before in the Mishnah of Ketubot, that the rabbis seem to be aware of coercive control, and they will not accept it. If you divorce if a man divorces a woman, he then has no further control about what she does next.